On Tuesday, 6 states voted in the second voting contest between just Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. So this is when it became a real two-person race. Now, the result, unfortunately, was not good for Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, Idaho, Michigan, Missouri, Mississippi, North Dakota, and Washington State all had voted, and there was a significant number of delegates at stake. And it appears that Biden did very well. Now, in Michigan, which I do believe is a must win, uh, Biden won it handily by a 53 to 36% margin. Now, it's funny because a lot of the areas that Bernie Sanders had carried back in 2016, rural areas mainly, ended up going to Joe Biden. So there's a lot of talk about whether, why it went to Bernie Sanders originally was very strong anti Clinton bias, right? So I don't know if that's true, but maybe it is. And maybe that contributed to that significant loss. Now, that's with 100% reporting, by the way. So no more is going to come in from Michigan. In Missouri, Biden got 60%. Um, Mississippi, he was at 81%. That's the percentage of the vote that he received. Won handily. So those are pretty massive numbers. In Idaho, it's a bit closer. Sanders lost to Biden by 6%, 49-43, with 100% reporting. Now, Washington State, that's more interesting. In Washington State, it's about a statistical tie. Bernie Sanders has a couple of thousand vote lead. And so, very likely, the delegates in Washington State are going to be split right down the middle. Now, the victory, of course, with Bernie Sanders actually won North Dakota with by about 13%. He got 53% of the vote compared to Biden's 40%. And so now that was North Dakota caucus. So not the greatest night. So you had a larger share of delegates ended up going to Joe Biden. And look, to be honest, that does make it a little bit more difficult for Bernie to catch up electorally. So now when you look at the delegate math, right? Bernie has he's about 140 or so delegates behind, and there's still actually a lot of delegates left to go. And Sunday there's going to be a debate. Now the debate is going to be a special sit-down debate where audience members are going to ask questions. So they changed the debate format. There's a lot of questions about that. Why they changed the debate format? Why they're allowing? Why does Biden need to sit down? Why can't he stand for 2 hours? Bernie Sanders can stand for 2 hours. Why can't Biden stand for 2 hours? Why can't he answer questions? Why are they shifting the tone of the debate? Look, those are interesting questions, right? Now, related to that, you already had Jim Clyburn, right? And you also had James Carville come out and say, well, that's it, wrap the whole thing up. We don't need to have any debates. Bernie, drop out. Bernie, drop out immediately, right? Oh, you lost Michigan. Bernie, drop out. Well, again, he's behind 140 delegates. Now, look, to be fair, this is a very hard hill, right, to climb back up for Bernie Sanders. And I'm going to be honest with you, the polling does not look great. But Bernie Sanders, even in Michigan, outperformed the polls. They had him up. They had some polls with Biden up by 30 to 40 points. So he did outperform the polls in some of the places. But yeah, it is pretty difficult looking forward. And again, I got to be honest with you guys. Now, what's interesting is we're still having the debate. By the way, there's actually no audience for this new debate. So I don't know how they're going to take audience questions because of CV19. So they say. But there is going to be a debate. And depending on how many people watch, especially in states that haven't voted yet, if they see that Joe Biden cannot cogently or coherently answer questions for 2 hours and generally makes himself look really bad. I mean, and I don't mean bad as in, oh, he makes gaffes and says something stupid. No, I mean, he shows people that maybe he might not be mentally cut out for taking on Donald Trump, well, that might change people's minds in some of these remaining states. So I don't know. That largely would depend on if the media. Well, it doesn't even matter so much if the media covers it, because that's going to be really hard to ignore when you're watching it in real time. And so that could be, I mean, that could be the difference, right? But look, there's a possible path. It is a very difficult path, but I wouldn't give up hope just yet. We should still continue to vote, to knock on doors, to call Bernie Sanders. He's going to still continue to run in the race. He's still going to get as many delegates as he can. And the more we get, by the way, even if we don't win, the more delegates we get, the more leverage we have going forward. So that could lead to maybe some possible cabinet picks, etc. That's if Bernie Sanders does not win. And again, if voters start to realize that Biden's not up to the task, if that he has some serious cognitive issues, as we've been pointing out in the show, that we've noticed, well, I mean, again, that could be the difference. So it makes sense that he stays in at least for another couple of, at least we'll have to see what happens on next Tuesday when another round of states votes. So, all right. Now, anyway, so going forward, like I said, get as many delegates, get as many wins as you can, and then use that for leverage. Because believe it or not, progressive policy positions are popular with the Democratic base, as I pointed out in polls before. And so this actually sets up a good future in the long run. And what we should be doing is looking at the long run, right? So, for example, one advantage the progressive movement has always had is the youth, right? Now, I know that a lot of people are dismissing the youth right now. Oh, they didn't show up, etc. Even though they broke hugely for Bernie Sanders. And let me give you some of the polling, by the way, on this, right? So you had, according to exit polls, Bernie Sanders doing very, very well with younger people. Michigan, Sanders got 83% of the 18 to 24-year-old vote, 81% of 25 to 29-year-olds, 62% of the 30 to 39 age group. That's my age group. And then, of course, it trailed off till there, or I'm sorry, from there. Biden ended up getting 73% of the 65 plus age group. So look, that is a huge divide. It shows that the fight is generational. You have those older voters, not all of them, obviously. There's some great older progressives that are 65 plus, and not at all trying to erase them. But generally, what you have here is a very large block of older 65-year-old plus voters who went for Joe Biden, who broke for Biden, and they generally tend to be more reliable for turnout. Now, that's not to say that, oh my God, it's those lazy young people. They didn't get out to vote, and so that's why we lose. No, we're not going that route, right? No. Here's the thing. A lot of younger voters don't have the ability to wait in line for 6-7 hours to vote. College students. There's a lot of voter disenfranchisement going on, obviously, but also voter suppression and college campuses. Closing polling places, making it more difficult for younger people to vote. And so, I mean, that is a huge barrier. Also, the fact that it's not a work day and that it's not a voter holiday. People who are retired obviously have a lot more of a easier time being able to go to the polls than someone who is, juggling 2 jobs in a college course. And so that is one of those things, right? But look, this huge fight, and another reason that there is such a big intergenerational divide, I think it's because cable news. I mean, that is one gigantic factor. You have a lot of older voters that still watch cable TV and get their news from Fox, MSNBC, CNN, right? And here's the thing. A lot of the voters, Democratic voters, Big majority, even people who are 65 or older, it's not that they're more conservative. Yes, they are more set in their ways, but they might agree with Bernie Sanders on issues. However, the mainstream media continues to pound the narrative of, yeah, but Bernie Sanders can't win. He can't win. He can't figure out ways to pay for it, which, again, they report disingenuously because it actually is explained in great detail how to pay for it, but nobody covers it in mainstream media. Nobody talks about, no, this is actually how you pay for it. No, the people that are doing that are independent outlets like us, right? Independent outlets who go over these, and they're not exactly sexy topics. I understand that, but we explain in great detail how these positions and how these policies are paid for. You don't see that kind of breakdown on cable news. And so that question of how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? I like this plan. I want to move to universal health care. But Bernie Sanders does not have a realistic path to get there. And he doesn't show us this very simple things of how to pay for it. No, that's because those people watch cable news. And they will not explain it because, well, let's be honest, a lot of the commercials on cable news are from pharmaceutical companies and health insurers. I mean, it's very simple. All you have to do is follow the money. Okay. And so, again, that message of, right, but he can't, I like him, but he can't win. He can't win. He can't win has basically been pounded into the heads of cable news viewers every day. And I've showed you examples. Chris Matthews, when he was still at MSNBC, and that wasn't too long ago, was constantly attacking Bernie Sanders. Joanne Reed constantly attacked Bernie Sanders. And so there is that message from just about every single cable news host that the guy can't win. He can't win. He's not going to beat Trump. And that, of course, right now is the number one priority of Democratic voters. As much as we disagree with it, that's a fact. They generally, yes, they care about policy, but policy is second to getting electoral wins. Now, I think it should be like one of these things that I don't get like the disconnect on is that, well, look, we have to keep voting for moderate politicians in order to win, and then we can work on policy later. But that never comes to fruition because what you have is when you have a moderate centrist win, then they go, well, we have to get a majority in Congress now. So we can't go progressive and we can't put up progressive policy. So we have to be moderate in order to appeal to Republicans or moderate voters. And so we can't be too progressive, right? But once we win, then we can start working on progressive policy. Okay, but then, I mean, it's a continuous game of Lucy with the football, right? Oh no, we just need to do this, and then we can do progressive policy. We've got to defend the ACA. We can't push for Medicare for all. We have to defend Obamacare from the Republicans, and we have to make sure the Republicans don't take back Congress. We defended the Senate, we took over the House now, but we can't do progressive policy because we have to make sure to win the Senate, and we had lost the White House, et cetera. It's just this constant game of moving the goalposts, right? And so this is the issue, right? And this is mainly pushed by cable news. And so this is the most insurmountable, I think, like wall that we hit, right? Is disinformation by bad faith actors in mainstream media. It is on purpose. It is malicious. It is deliberate. And they don't want us to have progressive policy. And so they don't inform people about progressive policy and about people who are pushing that progressive policy. There is a constant a bunch of misinformation. And there's also a lot of gaslighting that goes on as well. And so that is the one thing that we have to overcome is media bias against progressives and policy, right? So now, that said, while a lot of older voters tend to watch cable news, younger voters don't. In fact, um, what you have is people that generally go online and they question narratives and they follow the money. And so while we on independent media do have limited reach and cable news has billions of dollars, we've got young people. And so hopefully that is something that will help us overcome that block. Now, here's the thing. If Bernie Sanders doesn't win this nomination process, right? And as I mentioned before, he intends to continue fighting, right? The policies will eventually win. Even if we get Biden and Trump, it will only delay progress, but not stop progress. For example, exit polls have showed that a majority of Democratic voters support support progressive policies, right? Now, 57% of voters in Michigan say that they favor a government plan for all instead of private insurance. That is the Sanders position. 37% oppose the Sanders position. In Missouri, 59% favor the government plan. Mississippi, 60% favor the government plan. Mississippi. And look, I talked about the other states that have similar exit polls where you have Texas, for example. Texas Democrats, 63% said, yes, let's get rid of private insurance and let's go to a government-funded health insurance system. Democratic voters want these policies. And it gets better. Exit polls in several states also asked another question. And this is a thorny question, right? This is something that you would think Americans generally wouldn't support. But it's actually really close. Does the economic system of the United States work well as it is, need minor changes, or a complete overhaul? And so, I mean, there's the question right there. In Michigan, 44% favored complete overhaul. That is, in their words, a statistical tie with 47% who favored minor changes. So there is no question among voters that there needs to be change, whether it is radical change, in which 44%, or not just radical change, complete overhaul. 44% said, absolutely, sign me up to that. Whereas 47% said, well, we just need some tweaks. Interesting. In Missouri, complete overhaul won by 48%, over 43%. So it's even more when it comes to Missouri voters. This shows that the ideas espoused by Bernie Sanders are ascendant. Even if he loses, right, the movement carries on. And that's the thing. Now, progress, look, I think we should stop focusing so much on electoral politics. I know that's a weird thing for me to say since I focus a lot on electoral politics, but in reality, there's so much outside of just voting, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm saying you absolutely should, but there are other avenues outside, taking to the streets, pushing for those policy positions outside of just voting. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of saying, well, voting is all that I need to do. No, there's plenty of more that you can do outside to push these policies and politicians. And so outside of that, there's a lot of energy for change. Now, again, progress can be slowed electorally, but it can't be stopped. And so we should continue to push our agenda outside of that system. Let me just leave you with this too. While it seems like we lost big yesterday, don't despair. Because look, as you've seen, we have the youth, right? Younger people who don't follow the mainstream narrative, who don't watch cable news, who actually get informed about the issues from watching independent media. And you also have a majority of not only Democrats, but Americans favoring these policies. It is only a matter of time before progressive change wins out, as it always does. Keep fighting the fight, keep pushing outside of the electoral system as well as inside, and we will get that change. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.